Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with the Rear Admiral Jingles. And yes, I know I've used this title before, fairly recently as well, but it was the title of a video where the replay, without my realising it, was something that I'd already done a commentary on. So I'm reusing the title, damn it, it's too good to go to waste. And the title is significant because the focus of today's video, starring Error here, in the German Tier 10 battleship, the Große Kurfürst, is the strange victory disease that seems to befall people alarmingly all too often when they're playing World of Warships, when the team are ahead on points, kills, and capture circles, and all they have to do in order to win is, well, pretty much nothing. But for some reason, the winning teams seem to get gripped by the desire to not just win, but win harder. They just have to do more damage, they have to get more kills, and they take a commanding, winning position and just throw it away and end up losing the game. Now, I realise that's going to sound like a fairly major spoiler, but I'm not telling you which of the two teams present in this battle are the ones who are going to fall victim to victory disease. Although by the end of the battle you'll have probably figured it out. Anyway, Error in the Große Kurfürst. Got to admit, I'm not entirely sure which guns he has equipped here. Wait, 23-second reload? Although he did ripple fire them. I think these are the 406mm guns, the standard 16-inch guns that the ship comes with by default, and not the 420mm guns that you can upgrade to. Well, I say the 420mm guns are an upgrade, and technically that's correct, but I think it's safe to say the majority of Kurfürst captains stick with the regular 406mm guns. They don't do as much damage per shell, but they load faster, fire faster, and they're slightly more accurate. They're not accurate. This is a German battleship after all, but they're slightly more accurate than the 420s. So while you're not doing as much damage per shell, there's a better chance that you're going to hit something more often, which mathematically means that you're likely to do more damage with the 406mm guns. Whichever guns you happen to have equipped on this thing, nobody's ever going to accuse the Große Kurfürst of being a long-range sniper. And in fact, the whole ship is really kind of optimised for fighting at close to medium range. With a full secondary build on this ship, and well, we can tell straight away that Error does have a full secondary build because his secondaries, as indicated by the green circle, the very big green circle around his position on the minimap, that's the effective range of his secondaries, 11.6 kilometres. And the Große Kurfürst has a lot of secondaries. It has 8 150mm gun barrels and 20 128mm gun barrels. And because she's a German ship, although technically I suppose I should be saying because he's a German ship, the Germans refer to their ships in the masculine, every high explosive shell fired by a German ship gets a quarter of its caliber as high explosive penetration compared to the 1/6 that almost everybody else gets. And I'll save you from doing the mathematics. All of this ship's secondaries can penetrate the 32mm plating on Tier 8, 9 and 10 battleships. So unlike, for example, other secondary build monsters like the USS Massachusetts with its 127mm guns, which have 1/6 the caliber penetration, even if the Massachusetts captain was to take the IFHE skill for an extra 30% high explosive penetration, it still wouldn't be enough to do anything other than penetrate the plating of Tier 8, 9 and 10 cruisers. You'd still be setting a lot of fires, but outside of hitting the superstructure of high tier battleships, you wouldn't be doing any direct high explosive damage to them. Not so on the Große Kurfürst. It sets a lot of fires, and the secondaries also do a very respectable amount of damage, if you have the right skills. And that's kind of the issue for the Große Kurfürst, because a 19-point captain doesn't have enough skill points to turn a Große Kurfürst into a secondary build monster and make the ship as tanky as it really needs to be to excel at what it's designed to do, getting to within close and medium range of the enemy and really taking the fight right into their faces. Because you can't take all of those fun secondary gun skill points and still have points left over for things like fire prevention, basics of survivability and high alert. Nevertheless, the Grosser Kurfürst is still fairly tanky, even without those skills, and mostly that comes down to the turtleback armour. You've probably heard this mentioned in connection with German battleships before, and it kind of works like this. If you can imagine that the Citadel armour on most battleships is more or less a flat box surrounding the Citadel, but on a ship with turtleback armour, you take that flat box and you give it a garden shed roof. So if you think about how a shell is going to impact that armour when it's fired from close or medium range, when it has a much more flat trajectory, it's going to punch in through the belt armour, if at all, and then it's going to hit that angled Citadel turtleback roof, and it's just going to skip right off. That's why it's so difficult to Citadel German battleships with turtleback armour at close and medium range. At long range, however, when the shots are coming in from above, plunging fire, it's much, much easier to penetrate that turtleback. That's why when you're in a Grosser Kurfürst, you don't really want to be hanging back at long range, not just because your guns are hopelessly inaccurate and you're unlikely to do damage to much of anything, but also because you're actually more vulnerable at that maximum 20.6 kilometer range of your guns, and you're also the biggest ship in the game. And with in excess of 18 kilometers concealment, you're one of the most inviting targets, particularly for other ships with questionable accuracy, other battleships for example. They're more likely to be able to hit you, specifically when your turtleback armour is going to provide the least protection. Now that doesn't mean that you want to just YOLO straight in, because it doesn't matter how tanky your ship is in theory, if you just charge straight into a crossfire, you're going to start getting focused down from multiple directions and you are going to die. Which is precisely why Error here in the Grosser Kurfürst is not doing what that Sovietsky Soyuz up ahead is doing. He is pushing into what potentially could be a very dangerous crossfire. The Sovietsky Soyuz already has, and he's paying the price. If you look at his position on the map, yeah, that Kremlin up to the north is going to be a potentially serious problem. There are those enemy ships up ahead of him. We're busy dismantling the Sovietsky Soyuz. They can't shoot at him right now because of the island in the way. But if he were to push any further forward, that Kremlin, you can't quite see him anymore, but up to the north, just tucked in around the side of an island, would have perfect broadside shots at him. So Error is quite content to just sit here, keep the island to his north between himself and the Kremlin, and wait for these guys to make the same mistake that the Sovietsky Soyuz just did. And the enemy Grosser Kurfürst is only too happy to oblige. Now, technically, Error is in a crossfire here. He's got the Grosser Kurfürst over there, and there's a Nabucco up to the north. But, well, that Grosser Kurfürst isn't going to last for too much longer, and he can handle getting shot at by the Nabucco for a minute or two. If he was to move any further forward, he would be running a severe danger of getting shot at by the Kremlin to the north as well, so instead he's reversing. He's finished off the enemy Grosser Kurfürst. You'll note the enemy Alabama wasn't dumb enough to push around that corner. However, the friendly Tirpitz is basically doing exactly what Error is not. He's on low health, and yet he's still steaming full speed ahead into what could potentially be an extremely dangerous crossfire. In fact, probably the only reason he isn't already getting shot at is that the Cyclone has just finished closing in and visibility is down to a maximum range of 8 kilometers. Now, under these circumstances, you'd imagine that the Kremlin up to the north would now be heading south to actually get visibility of some targets to shoot at. But he also has to take into account the fact that the cap at Alpha has just fallen, and he really doesn't want to blunder into the ships that have taken control of that, so he's probably moving south, but he's probably being a bit cautious about it. Meanwhile, the Tirpitz just ran straight into the Alabama, thanks to the radar, which must be from the Kronstadt, because that's the only surviving radar ship on the enemy team. So we know that the Kronstadt is significantly closer than his last reported position on the minimap would indicate. And thanks to that Kronstadt's radar, the Alabama, if he was paying attention, and based on the fact that he didn't make the same mistake as the enemy Grosser Kurfürst, he's managed to get 2 kills, and despite the fact that he no longer knows exactly where Error is, he's doing an extremely good job of avoiding getting shot at by him. You kind of have to assume that the Alabama has been and is paying attention. But this is actually pretty good, because even though Error has just been surprised by the enemy Izumo, although you could equally make the case that the Izumo has just been surprised by Error, the fact that that Alabama has taken such care to ensure that he never was in direct line of fire from Era's Grosser Kurfürst means that Era was able to get around this side of the island without being detected, which probably means that, well, we know the Alabama can't shoot at him because the island's in the way, but it probably also means the Kremlin can't shoot at him either because the island's in the way, which means this Ismo can't expect any help from anyone. Of course, he does still have 9 16-inch guns of his own, and those torpedoes from the Yu Yang could have been a little better, but I can't see Era losing this fight. He's going to take some damage here, of course, because having turtleback armor doesn't make you immune to taking damage. It just makes it extremely unlikely that you're going to take citadel damage, particularly at this kind of range. Oh, there's the enemy Kronstadt. But the Ismo's down. Kronstadt arrived too late to make any difference. The Alabama deliberately, and probably very wisely, kept himself out of the fight. Well, he kept himself out of the fight with Era. He's in a fight. It's just not with Era. But again, you know, that shows that the Alabama isn't a bad player at all. He's not just YOLOing into the middle of open water where he can get focused down by as many ships as possible. He's using the terrain, and he's probably going to die anyway, but it's remarkable that he's lasted as long as he has. And he's done that by using the environment, the terrain, and the capabilities of his ship to try to limit the number of ships shooting at him at any one time. So well done to the Alabama. Now, why the hell would a Hindenburg be given this much broadside at this kind of range to a Grosser Kurfürst? Is it because he's supremely confident in the Grosser Kurfürst's inability to hit the side of the barn from the inside? Or do you suspect it's because he's been launching torpedoes? Time after time after time, you see cruisers suiciding in order to get torpedoes away against battleships. And of course, Era knew exactly what was coming. He's turned away, the torpedoes ran out of range. And there's the Kremlin. Finally, the Kremlin actually enters the battle. But what is he doing? Oh, he's pinned himself up against the island. He's got no choice now but to either give broadside or get closer. And he doesn't really want to do either. But those are the only choices that he has. So, is he going to be focusing the cruisers? Because he did just obliterate the Chapayev, and there is another cruiser for him to shoot at, and yes, he is shooting at the Rune, who's trailing Era's Grosser Kurfürst, and now he's turning in. Of course, he can't do a thing about the constant barrage of high explosive shells from all of these German secondaries. But what he can do is slow down so that he disappears in the cyclone. Now that's actually great news for the Rune as well, because he probably wasn't going to last an awful lot longer. In fact, they are still exchanging shots, although they're pretty much firing blind at this point. The cyclone is still in full effect, and that Kronstadt has just killed the friendly Hindenburg, so now it's 4 against 3. Grosser Kurfürst, Yu Yang and Rune against Kremlin, Shimakaze, Kronstadt and Ibuki. We got a fairly good idea, judging by the torpedoes and the smokescreen, of where we can expect the Shimakaze to be. The Yu Yang is taking the opportunity to slip into Charlie and take that from the enemy team's control, which will be good, because if he manages to do it, it'll be the only cap that Era's team control. We know the Kremlin is down in that direction, or he was. The last time we saw him, he was changing course, so he could really be, well, not exactly anywhere, but he could be coming out from either side of that island. Rune, what are you doing? Era has desperately been trying to use team chat to get that Rune to come with him, preferably behind him. Because let's face it, if you're expecting to run into a Kremlin in the middle of a cyclone, you really want the first thing that Kremlin sees to be a Grosser Kurfürst. Because the Kurfürst can take it. The Rune can't. But the Rune is determined to do his own thing, and oh, yeah, well, we can't see them because the cyclone still shut down visibility, but he's definitely found something. Looking at the map, I don't think it's the Kremlin, I think it's the Kronstadt and the Ibuki. And that's not good news either. I mean, but the Rune made the decision to head towards where the enemy ships were instead of hiding behind Era in the Grosser Kurfürst here. And that is a decision he's just going to have to live with. Although, it's probably more accurate that that's a decision he's going to have to die with. He's definitely getting shot at by more than one ship. There's the Kronstadt. Well, we can at least help him out. Oh, and there's the Ibuki as well. those shots are actually looking pretty good. Kronstadt down. More torpedoes from the Shimakaze. There's the Shimakaze, and there's the Kremlin, who's getting shot at by the Yu Yang from the safety of his smokescreen. Right. Yeah, the Rune is... he's not going to survive this. Oh, he has scored some very, very good hits on the Ibuki. But he's kind of dead. Although he does still have shots in the air. Alright, that was a trade. That wasn't actually too bad. I mean, heading in that direction was an extremely questionable decision on behalf of the Rune, but he at least managed to trade, and Error took out the Kronstadt. So it could have actually been a lot worse. I mean, it could have been a lot better. They could have still had the Rune alive, but at least they're no longer outnumbered. It's a straight 2-on-2 fight between a Yu Yang and a Grosser Kurfürst, and that Kremlin and the enemy Shimakaze. And the Shimakaze must have line of sight. We know the Kremlin doesn't, it's on the other side of the island, but somebody is still spotting Error here. And now they aren't. The cyclone is lifting, visibility is being restored. So the fact that the Shimakaze was spotting Error and now he isn't, probably means that initially he was attempting to pursue him and follow him around that island up ahead. But he's changed his mind and he's now cutting across it in order to try to get a torpedo salvo off around the right-hand side of the island that the Kremlin's just disappeared behind in an attempt to intercept Error with his torpedoes as he steams around the corner. Has Error figured that out as well? That's the question. The Yu Yang's in the cap, but it's not going to be enough. The enemy team are more than 400 points ahead, and there's not much more than 2 minutes of this game left, so all they have to do to win is hold on to that lead. Now that's going to be easier said than done for the Kremlin because he's kind of big and kind of obvious. It's going to be extremely difficult for him to disengage if the Yu Yang decides that he wants to keep him spotted. But the Shimakaze, who has just been spotted by the Yu Yang, is both the fastest and stealthiest ship remaining in this battle. So it doesn't really matter if between the two of them, Error and the Yu Yang, finish off the Kremlin. The Shimakaze can still win just by virtue of staying hidden and staying alive for the next 2 minutes. So why he's choosing to get into a gunfight with a Yu Yang is anybody's guess. And oh look, there are the torpedoes that we predicted. Once the Shimakaze had been spotted, it didn't really matter whether or not Error had guessed that's where he was going to be, and therefore there were going to be torpedoes coming. Once he'd seen the Shimakaze, he knew there were going to be torpedoes coming, so he took efforts to not run into them. And there's the Kremlin, and I don't know exactly why. Well, I think I can guess why Error didn't give him all 4 of his turrets. He was probably expecting, with a broadside target like that at that kind of range, that the 2 front turrets were going to be enough. Sadly, they weren't. And then when he opened up with the 2 rear turrets, well, German accuracy, sadly they weren't either. But he's probably got the Kremlin all the same. And if he hasn't, I'm pretty sure that the torpedoes from the Yu Yang will finish him off. And that will just leave the Shimakaze. The enemy team are on more than 900 points, and there's less than a minute of this game remaining. So unless the Shimakaze wants to take on a Grosser Kurfürst and a Yu Yang at the same time, he should be turning around and running for the border, because he's the stealthiest and the fastest ship remaining in this battle, and he just has to stay alive for the next 40 seconds or so, and he's won this game. But he just had to try to win harder, didn't he? Just winning isn't enough. No, you have to win harder. Well, he's definitely going to kill Error here. But has he forgotten about the Yu Yang? And for that matter, the Grosser Kurfürst secondaries. Because I don't think I've ever been this confident. I mean, he's going to kill Error, but the Yu Yang's also going to kill him. And all because he just had to try to win harder. When winning isn't good enough, YOLO, attempt to win harder, and more often than not, you're probably just going to lose. And that's it for today, folks. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.